Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Career Conversations panel. I'm Hannah Alcasey, Career Strategist at Seneca Works, Seneca College. We're very happy to be having this Career Conversations panel for Bipoc learners. This panel is being hosted to you, and it's a great collaboration between Humber and Seneca College. We have a wonderful group of guest panelists today that will be sharing their career journey with us, their advice and tips about how to navigate a work. So we'll go ahead and start with the reading of the land acknowledgement for Seneca College. I would like to introduce my colleague, Karen White. Her pronouns are she, her. Karen is the Indigenous counselor at First People at Seneca. Welcome, Karen, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hannah, for inviting me and Sheila. Seneca acknowledges the land on which its buildings are housed and where students, faculty, support staff, and members of the public gather. Seneca campuses are Newnham, Seneca at York, Markham, and King, including the Williams Treaty, are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are guests on this space, and it is our shared obligation to respect, honor, and sustain the land. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Great to see everyone today. My name is Phil Leggett, and I'm the Interim Manager of Advising Services at Humber. And I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Quay Boissonneau, to you. Quay uses she, her pronouns, is the Manager of Indigenous Education and Engagement, and is going to share a land acknowledgement on behalf of Humber. Over to you, Quay.
Miigwech, Karen, and thank you, Phil. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's event, Career Conversations for BIPOC Learners. Quay Gabarazi Gwen, Dishnakas, Kiriganzi B. Donjaba, Makwa Dodem. And for all my non-Anishinaabe Moan speakers, my name is Kuzan Spuzano. Like Phil said, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Garden River First Nation. Today, I'm here to provide you with the land acknowledgement, but before I do that, I'm going to ask you some questions to reflect on. So can you name 10 Indigenous nations? And can you name 5 Indigenous nations? That's okay. But do you know the treaty that Humber College and the City of Toronto sit on? So I'll tell you a little bit. Before Humber College was established in 1967 and before Toronto became a city in 1973, there was a treaty amongst the Indigenous nations for this region called the Dish with One Spoon. It is important for you to know what legal agreements are part of this region that you are now living, learning, and working on. So when we begin to learn about the histories of the lands we're on, we start by acknowledging that Humber College is located within the traditional and treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, known as Adobagok, the place of the alders in the Michissagi language. The region is uniquely situated along the Humber River watershed, which historically provided an integral connection for Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. Home to people of numerous nations, and now home to some of you, Adobagok continues to provide a vital source of interconnection for all. And next time you're at Kipling Station, you'll have a better understanding of the Adobagok Road that was newly installed. I also want to invite you to start your learning by Googling the Toronto Purchase and the land claims that has been happening with the regional communities. I also want to invite you to stay virtually connected with the center and all of our upcoming events by following us on Instagram and Facebook at Humber Indigenous or on Twitter at Humber Indig. But I'll hand it back to Phil for now.
Thank you, Quay. Next, I would like to introduce today's panel moderator to you, Charmaine Johnson. Charmaine uses she, her pronouns and is a career and mental health counselor who works as a will coordinator at Seneca College, as well as has a private practice offering mental health counseling with a focus on anxiety and career wellness. While Charmaine works with clients from all backgrounds, the majority of her clients identify as BIPOC, and Charmaine approaches counseling from a holistic lens, incorporating hypnosis and creative therapy while addressing the unique challenges faced by racialized individuals. Charmaine has a master's in counseling psychology and a double honors BA in sociology and mass communication, where her focus was on race relations. Welcome, Charmaine, and I'll pass it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate that, and I'm really happy to be here today. As all of you as learners know, you are on your own career journeys at this point, and sometimes you have your successes and sometimes there's challenges. And if you're a BIPOC learner, that has additional challenges that may come along with it, whether it's microaggressions or just navigating the systemic barriers that you may face. So I'm really excited about the panel that we have here today, because you're going to learn from the panel that we have. They're going to give some great advice and great tips. So we're going to get started by just talking a little bit and introducing the panelists to you. So our first panelist is Imran Mouna. And Imran is the co-founder of a simulation company called Instage. So Imran, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey at this point?
Sure, happy to do that, Charmaine. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, happy to talk a bit about myself briefly here and Instage. Again, a huge thank you to Humber and Seneca for having me out here. My career journey began, I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I've always been someone who's passionate about public speaking. I've always enjoyed being on stage, taking part in different plays and things of that nature while I was in school. And I saw an opportunity to blend two interests of mine to become one of the founders of Instage. Instage, in a nutshell, is a safe place for students and people, further in their careers to develop their communication skills. And so, as Charmaine indicated here, Instage creates simulations where people can practice for a number of different types of communication-based experiences. A lot of the work we do with the colleges is to prepare students for their first job interview. But beyond that, we want to use these simulations to also give people a safe place to practice for a number of scenarios they're going to face on the workplace, whether it's meeting a customer for the first time, navigating a team meeting, handling feedback, whether it's positive or constructive, and again, give them a safe place to build skill and confidence talking about the experience they have. And so my experience in the company has ranged from everything at the start of this, developing the software that would run these simulations, to actually using the technology and practicing to participate in pitch competitions around the world. And so it's near and dear to my heart, and excited to answer any questions you have that I can help you with today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Imran. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about what you do and what Instage is all about. So let's get now to the second panelist that we have. So this is Tanya Stevens, and Tanya is the Quality Control Analyst at Manulife. So welcome, Tanya. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey so far?
Thank you, Charmaine, and thank you to everyone for having me here today. So, Bujuanin, Mino Gigijab, Tanya and Dishinakas, Kuchuching and Doeba. So, just like previously said, for those who don't speak Anishinaabe, I said, welcome, hello, my name is Tanya. I'm from the Kuchuching First Nation. So, as Charmaine mentioned, I am a quality control analyst at Manulife Bank. I am also the founder and chair of our employee resource group, IPTA, which stands for Indigenous Peoples and Their Allies. So we have many employee resource groups here at Manulife, and I saw a need to have one for our Indigenous employees and allies. I am also working with the Downey Wenjack Fund to bring legacy spaces to our company. And like I said, I work for the bank and do everything that deals finance, but on the quality control side. So I QC everything that our processors do. Thank you. Miigwech.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So our third panelist for today is Keenan Jeppesen, and he's a Director of Outreach for Onyx Initiative. So Keenan, welcome. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey so far?
Hi, thanks, Charmaine. And again, thank you to everyone at Seneca and Humber for the opportunity to come speak with you guys. I am a competitive basketball player turned working stiff after playing basketball and studying economics at Brown, and then coming back home to Canada where I did a finance MBA at McMaster University. I went back to the US where I worked at Black Entertainment Television for several years in New York City on the media sales side. From there, I was recruited to run the marketing for a consumer tech brand out in Silicon Valley. So it was in Northern Cali and both in LA until 2018, where I kind of got burnt out from the corporate world, returned back home to Canada for the first time in my adult life. And I returned to one of my passions and started coaching basketball. It was a great opportunity for me to connect back with, you know, a passion of mine in basketball, but also in working with young people. And 2 years of doing that and some consulting on the side, it led me to the opportunity where I am today, and that was to help launch the Onyx initiative, which is a brand new not-for-profit organization focused on bridging the systemic gap in the recruiting and selection of Black university and college scholars for roles in corporate Canada. So again, we are a nonprofit organization that both brings awareness and exposure to opportunities in the corporate world. One of our corporate partners is Manulife, who's been a fantastic partner. So happy to see Tanya on the call. And we provide supports, including mentorship, coaching, and professional development through online and virtual courses, and then actual opportunities, paid either internships or full-time entry-level roles through our platform, our online platform at the Onyx Initiative. So again, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to speak with you all today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very interesting and diverse background that you've got. And we'll learn a little bit more about that. Our next panelist, the last but definitely not least, is Jane Psutka. She's the manager of Indigenous and Enablement and Recruitment at KPMG. So Jade, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey so far?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And thank you to Seneca and Humber for having me here. And so Sugoli, Jadelyn Psutka, Nyungats. Hello, my name is Jadelyn Psutka. I'm Haudenosaunee from Oneida and part of the Turtle Clan. So for me, I am of mixed ancestry, both Indigenous as well as Polish. And my career journey has taken me to a lot of crazy and really fun places. So I've done a number of different types of roles, having started my career off in corrections and then moving into HR, surprisingly. But I've had the ability to work with a number of really great organizations, from Mississippi Aboriginal Employment and Training, which really kind of kicked off my understanding of human resources and got me interested in this field. And it was because of them that I was able to grow in there. And then I moved over into RBC, the bank, and did some really great things working with youth, as well as the recruitment teams. And now I am glad to have joined KPMG and kind of kicking off everything that's happening there in terms of their recruitment talent attraction strategies, and working more so inside the business to bring more inclusive environment and more equity within the recruitment process. I am also a happy member of a board called Focus Forward for Indigenous Youth, and we partner with communities across Canada to bring buildings, programming to Indigenous youth. I also participate with Youth Build, and that's a little bit about me, but very excited to be here and have the conversation with everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is our great panel for today. As you can hear, and this is something that I think is really important for all learners to understand, is that many of our panelists' careers have not been linear. They've kind of gone and done a few other different things before they've actually found maybe their footing, right? So it's just something to keep in mind for yourselves as learners. But let's talk to our panelists a little bit more. Let's get to learn a little bit more about them by getting straight to our questions. So the first question that we have today, which has already been touched on a little bit, but we're going to delve into it a little bit more, is how has your identity been an important or meaningful piece of your career development? So why don't we start with you, Imran? You want to take this question? Your volume is off. Yeah.
There's fun for virtual meeting bingo. All right. Yeah. How has my identity been a meaningful part of my career development? I think this has been something that is constantly changing throughout my journey, and it's part of a discovery process. I think I started early on in my career. I was fortunate enough during school to have an opportunity to go through something like an internship at an engineering firm to give me a sense of what that would be like. Going through the engineering program, I attended Queen's University. I didn't know what it was going to be like actually working in the field. And so I'm glad I had that opportunity early on to start trying to find out what I did want out of my career. And as Charmaine indicated, it definitely wasn't a linear career path. It took a lot of trial and error, which is something that I have always used to try and learn about myself. And so as I went through that journey, I had an opportunity to act firsthand in a lot of the engineering projects at that firm. It was an incredible opportunity. I had an opportunity to build James Bond's car, the Aston Martin, for those of you that know it. I had an opportunity to work on military satellite dishes, a really wide spectrum of engineering challenges. And for a long time, I thought that might be what I was interested in doing, but there was a part of myself missing in that work. And as I mentioned early on, I've always enjoyed being on stage. I've always enjoyed a public speaking side of things. I've gravitated towards theater and the arts, which is another big part of my personality. And Queens had a very inclusive community around that. I never felt excluded from those opportunities at the university. And so I did take part in many of them. And for me, journeying into Instage meant bringing a number of my interests together. When I saw the opportunity to use the software that we've now developed and turned into a simulation environment for people to build the same skill set I enjoy so much, I saw an opportunity to bring together two parts of my identity. One, of course, being an analytical side of things, being an engineer, and the other side of things being an artist and someone who enjoys, expressing those kinds of interests. And so I use that technology to create my part of Instage. And that's just a bit about how I've discovered my interests and merged them into a career path over the last few years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Tanya, what about you? You want to tell us a little bit about how your identity has been an important or meaningful piece of your career development?
Absolutely. I'm going to apologize if you hear dogs barking in the background, as there are two of them outside of the door. So for myself, my identity came a little bit in recognizing and acknowledging my Indigenous heritage came later. I was raised by my grandmother. My mother was there, of course, but my mother worked two, sometimes three jobs. My grandmother was a residential school survivor, and with myself and my sister being born as light complected as we were, I was raised in Toronto. She had raised us and very strongly encouraged my mother to raise us white. So outside of the house, there was no acknowledging that we were Indigenous. It was we presented ourselves as white. So my identity came later in life in that once my grandmother had passed and status was reinstated, then becoming comfortable with that again and openly acknowledging who I am, then I brought that to work. I brought that side of me to work. And once I did that, then I became vocal in, like I said, I started an employee resource group, IPTA. So, in starting the conversation, talking about who I am and not so for some it was suddenly who I had become, but it wasn't. It was who I am now out loud to everyone in the world, not just who I was at home. So bringing that has opened, I wouldn't be here today without having that conversation and sharing that information about myself at work. IPTA wouldn't happen without my talking about my identity and who I am. I wouldn't have, without openly acknowledging it, I wouldn't be also part of the Downey Wenjack Fund and having that wonderful part that I am also bringing to Manulife, all of those things wouldn't happen without really talking about who I am. So my career wouldn't be where it is today without openly acknowledging my true self.
Wow. That's really interesting. It must be a very freeing experience to be able to bring your whole self to work and not kind of hide part of you at home, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely it is.
So Jade, would you like to kind of jump in here as well? Would you like to be able to maybe share a little bit about how your identity has maybe been an important or meaningful piece of your career development?
Yeah, for sure. And I have a somewhat not completely similar, but along the same lines as Tanya. So growing up, we knew that we were Indigenous, but it was never really talked about. My mother was unfortunately adopted out of the community and set with a family in a small farming town. So I went along with her in that journey of kind of discovering and reclaiming our identity and who we are. So it's been a long process. And really, it was thanks to the community that I was able to kind of develop personally and professionally, exploring who I was and my own identity and what it meant to me to be Indigenous and how that kind of comprised my whole self, if you will. So I was able to kind of participate very heavily within the Indigenous community. I was welcomed by every community, whether it was through post-secondary or when I relocated to Toronto. They were all such big pieces of kind of forming who I was and the work that I do. And it's thanks to them that I get to tie my identity so closely into the work that I do every day. I'm very fortunate to work with my community every single day and bring them back into that business setting and bring those perspectives back into the organizations that I work with and start making those meaningful changes, those impacts. So I mean, I'm lucky because I get to work with my community and in my identity and bring my whole self in every aspect of everything I do every day. So I feel very lucky that I'm able to do that. But it really is thanks to the community and kind of going through that process with me and figuring out who I was as an Indigenous person and how I can show that in my day to day, my work, and also just as my everyday outwardly. So.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing. So I can see that community support is really instrumental in you being able to feel really comfortable in the workplace then.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And so Keenan, would you tell us a little bit about how your identity has played an important role or meaningful piece of your career development?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it profoundly directed how my career has developed and changed. You know, and it definitely informed the work that I do today. You know, kind of acknowledging the importance of my ethnic identity. You know, informed me and you know. Just kind of gave me the self-awareness that meaningful work and embracing that part of me and looking if to find ways to give back to those who were like me or are like me. Yeah, completely shifted my focus in my career and what was important to me. But the other thing I would acknowledge is that ethnic identity is is important to many of us, but there are so many parts of our identities, and I think that for example, identifying as an athlete has been something that's been important to me, through my life, and I think that whether it's ethnic identity or identity through passion or other identities, if you can embrace that and understand that and find a way to bring that to your work every day, it's truly a freeing and empowering experience.
Thank you very much. That is an important message. We heard something similar from Imran as well, bringing that creative piece into the workplace as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're going to move on to our next question. So the next question then for each of our panelists is, from your experience, what are some of the potential challenges that BIPOC job seekers and students should be aware of? And what opportunities do you feel exist? So why don't we start, maybe Jade, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, for sure. So I think some of the challenges that the BIPOC community might face is getting access to that network. I hear that a lot from students and professionals, and getting access to those networks and kind of maneuvering within that and understanding how to kind of grow, develop professionally within those spaces. So I always encourage people to take those opportunities to engage in events such as this, through whether it's your post-secondary, you see it online, or maybe it's through an association or an organization that's putting something on to build out that network and really engage with individuals and have those conversations around about your development and how you're going to develop and perform within your career. So I think it's really just narrowing down on those, being conscious of the individuals that you're engaging with. So being selective, if you will, in terms of who you're going to engage with and what capacity, the expectations of that person, the expectations that person might have upon you, and really kind of narrowing it down as you're having those conversations about, okay, where is my career going to lead me? What are the top organizations or employers that I'm going to be looking for, and what kinds of roles am I interested in? And being prepared and coming into those conversations, really utilizing this experience as an opportunity to build out those networks and develop yourselves and really understand also what you want to do, and how you want to go about that. I think that's a huge piece, the networking piece. I mean, it's so difficult now with internships and gaining that experience. But I think it's just taking those opportunities and really building those out and making them something that can turn into a role or an opportunity or an internship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Tanya, what about you? Would you like to add anything to this? So can you tell us some of the potential challenges that BIPOC job seekers and students should be aware of, and
You were cutting off a little bit there, Charmaine.
opportunities that you think may exist for them?
Oh, yes. So for myself, any potential challenges that BIPOC job seekers or students should be aware of, I would mention, kind of expand on what Jade had said and bring in those unconscious bias. They are there, people do have them still, but as long as you know yourself, you truly know yourself, and you bring yourself to whether it's a job interview, whether it's a job that you start, as long as you are being yourself and you truly know yourself, you can overcome any of those bias that are out there. And it's saying that it being unconscious, a lot of people, I have come into contact with people, they aren't aware of the things they are saying, but thank goodness we are in an environment that is slowly changing and growing, and people are becoming a little bit more open to conversations like this, right? We can look back a year or so ago, we weren't having conversations like this. I have had the opportunity of being in a number of different conversations. So being aware of those. Once you do get out and you are in a job, looking at things like what I am in, the ERG, that there are groups out there, there are people to reach out to talk to. The ERG leads, so that being the employee resource groups, all sorts of different companies have different types of groups. To be aware that those are there, even before you, when you're in the job interview process, asking about those sorts of things so that you know before you really want to get to know the company before you go there, and ask what type of resources they do have available to support people like you, people who are in the BIPOC community.
Okay, thank you so much. Keenan, would you like to contribute to this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to just add on. I think both Jade and Tanya hit it exactly on the head, right? So part of developing the Onyx initiative, we did a ton of research into this area, and one of the main things we found is that Black individuals specifically, but BIPOC community as well, typically lack the family and social networks that bring exposure and awareness to opportunities like internship and entry-level roles. right? So it is it's an incredible challenge to overcome. But there are opportunities with organizations like Onyx, opportunities like panels like this, and opportunities to network, to kind of give yourself, take back that advantage, right? Connecting with people, to learn, bring awareness and exposure to those types of opportunities. And the other thing I think that Tanya said is so important is that your voice matters, and it's important. And the advantage, you said there's some, talk about challenges and opportunities. Well, the opportunity is that there are more and more empathetic employers who are acknowledging the value of a diverse workforce, and it really has measurable results. So we're in the process of kind of formalizing some of that research to show that diversifying your workforce actually creates measurable bottom line results, to business results in terms of increased patents, in terms of employee satisfaction, employee retention, very important measurable business results. So again, I would just highlight that, understand that your voice is important and has value, and your experience does as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Imran, did you want to contribute to this?
Yes, absolutely. I want to echo something Keenan just said, and of course Tanya mentioned this as well, and it's that idea that you are valuable, and that it takes knowing yourself to recognize that. I think a lot of the challenges we're hearing about right now are external challenges, things that you feel are restricting you from another person's perspective. But I think it's worth being aware that some of these challenges can be self-imposed. Based on the mindset you might have about, what people's preconceived notions are. I think today the opportunities are becoming more and more available to people. But if you're someone like myself that grew up with, the mindset shared by parents or relatives or friends who did live in a different time where the opportunities were different, it's difficult to potentially recognize that those opportunities are there. And I'll give you one quick example. I was in a play. I'm going to talk a little bit more about plays than I expected to today, but I was in a play in university, and just some quick context. I was at a New Year's party, years later after this play, and it was at a country bar, and I'd been kind of advised growing up that might be a place I'm not entirely welcome, and I never felt that way. I grew up in a rural community around friends that loved going to country bars, and so I just went along. That's just where I ended up for New Year's. And I felt some eyes on me there that day, and I started to think back to some of the stories I'd heard growing up that, okay, I might not be welcome here. And I felt like someone was, potentially following me around the bar that night. And I told a couple of my friends, hey, I'm aware that I might not be welcome here. Just to give you guys a heads up, I'm kind of keeping an eye on a situation. And, they were there for me. They said, yeah, for sure, which we've heard about. There are more and more empathetic people out there that are becoming aware of these situations and there to help you. But that night it was actually myself against myself, because these individuals, there was someone watching me. They came up to me and told me, hey, I loved you in that play at Queen's 3 or 4 years ago. And the reason I tell that story is because I think sometimes we can avoid certain situations. I was avoiding these people all night, and there they were, actually fans of mine, encouraging me to do something I was proud of and that I enjoy. And so I just caution you on the challenges you might self-impose by thinking there are people that might not want you to do something, or that might be acting against you, and really there are more and more allies out there than you might be aware of.
Thank you so much. That's very important points. It's really interesting and important for you to say just exactly that some of these feelings might be actually self-imposed. So to summarize kind of what we covered here is not only the importance of networking, but also just being aware of the unconscious bias that might exist, but knowing yourself and not maybe limiting yourself based on just your own thoughts and your own feelings on the situation. Thank you so much. So for our next question now, this question is, have you ever experienced being the only voice at the table, or had to be the advocate for an entire community? How do you deal with this? I know I've definitely dealt with this at times, so I'm curious to hear how you've all dealt with it if you've had to. So Jade, I see you smiling. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yes, I have definitely had that happen to me more than once, where I was the only Indigenous person in the room. Apparently, I knew everything and all of it that's ever happened, and I was here to speak on behalf of the entirety of the community. And I always like to acknowledge how ridiculous that is to the group. Let them know, like, I'm one person with one background, very specific. I come in with different experiences than another Indigenous person, and let them know, like, hey, have we extended to our resources? Have we had the conversation with other Indigenous individuals? Have we brought them together to have those conversations? Have we brought them in? I'm one person, and if we haven't done that and we haven't extended those offers to consult with Indigenous peoples and communities, then we're not going to have this conversation. I usually cut it off pretty fast and quick and say, I'll give you my perspective, but this is a grain of salt. Like, it means nothing in the whole scheme of things. So I always tell them, yeah, you need to consult additional individuals and bring everybody to the table. So I do say that, and I think I've probably made some people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I think in the end, it is a good learning experience for people, that yes, I'm just one individual from a large community that's incredibly diverse. So yeah, that's kind of my recommendation is to acknowledge the ridiculousness of it, and to encourage them to do better, to start consulting with individuals. And if they don't have access to that individuals, that's highlighting an enormous problem. And that's a problem that they need to deal with and start working towards solutions.
Okay, thank you so much. So Tanya, did you want to contribute to this?
So, yeah, laughing and nodding the whole time Jade is speaking. So same in starting the employee resource group for Indigenous people. So in such a large corporation as the one that I work for, I have people coming from all over the globe who say, well, what about this Indigenous community? What do I say if I'm speaking to this Indigenous person? And I do turn them back to, honestly, a lot of the times to Google, because, and I kind of chuckle because I am Ojibwe. I know, and I have the resources at my fingers like everybody else does. So, and I say, well, when in doubt, Google, right? Like, why don't we Google together? Because I don't know. Or why don't you do what I have done as well and reach out to, like, if you go to any university or college, there are Indigenous services at all of these places. You could reach out to those people. You could reach out to elders in the community. I do try to look up that information myself so that then I could go back to them and give them my findings. But I do chuckle and at them and I say the kind of the same thing that Jade does and say, I am one Indigenous person in this great big, this great big pot of many, many, many different Indigenous people with different experiences, different backgrounds. Their cultures are different, right? If I am talking like Jade's culture is different from my Indigenous culture, so they're and depending upon, even if you take Indigenous Ojibwe people from Eastern Ontario and those of Western Ontario, there it's so different. The language is different, right? Everything is so different. So yeah, really do your research. And I always offer up to do it with them. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have you been the only voice at the table and had to speak for the whole community? Can you hear me, Keenan?
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a minute. Yeah.
So I'm asking if you've been the only voice at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went from an environment, working at Black Entertainment Television, which was kind of my first introduction to the professional world, where I was actually, it was an incredibly diverse, not only ethnically diverse, but gender diverse. And, going from that to Silicon Valley, which was the, kind of complete opposite. And, like Tanya and both Tanya and Jade said, I think, always in those situations, it's good to point out the reality that, you are one person and one voice, and that you do not represent all Indigenous people or all Black people or all women. So I think that's important. But I also think it's an opportunity, and Tanya spoke about it. I think it's an opportunity to educate, and suggest resources, and I like the idea of offering to do it with them. And again, you without feeling the responsibility that this is your job or your obligation to do it. But if so inclined, I kind of look at it as an opportunity to educate. And then often within a work environment, it can be your opportunity to speak up and have your voice heard. So sometimes in a room full of people, you might be looked at as, hey, what is the Black perspective on this? And, that can be frustrating and an undue responsibility or burden, but it's also an opportunity to, again, like Jade said, bring resources, bring other organizations, other information to the table, and kind of step up and take a leadership position, from that perspective. So I say accept the kind of the hilarity of it, but also take advantage of the opportunity, both to educate and to have your voice heard.
Great, thank you so much. Important message there. Imran, do you have anything to add to this? Have you been the only voice at the table?
I have been fortunate, I think, again, that I haven't felt this pressure as much as I'd say the rest of the group has, thankfully, just, by luck of the draw. But I definitely have heard this from friends, other people of color, and they'll somewhat ask me to empathize with them and say, it's frustrating when this happens. But I think I have had a unique experience and can kind of share that with them. I can say, they'll say, what's it like when this happens to you? And I can, I guess, in a sense, give them the hope that it doesn't happen to everyone, and that there is a chance that things will change for them. So if I'm asked this question, typically I'll say, well, normally we all bring a unique experience to the table. We all have something we're the only voice at the table for. It's not always about our identity. There's a lot more to you than that. So I think that that's something that I can bring to this conversation, just again because of my unique experience. If I do have friends that ask me or are more or less frustrated with being asked this question, I can give them the sense that, hey, that doesn't happen to me often, but I will stand up for marginalized communities, people of different sexual orientation, people with different backgrounds, just because of my own sense of empathy. And so I think it takes a little pressure off them, if that makes sense, that, this doesn't happen to everyone. So I hope that helps dissipate the feeling that this is something that they're going to be going through the rest of their lives. And if that helps contribute to some of this conversation, there's another side of it. It's not the only way this conversation goes. I think we may have lost Charmaine there for a second, but I agree
kind of
with
embrace
Suzette.
that situation if it comes your way.
Sorry, I'm losing a.
Yeah, just necessarily. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Yeah, what I was just saying is that it sounds like the.
Oh, I think Charmaine's, you're in and out a little bit.
Well, one thing I can comment on just while we're figuring that out is that I do agree with Suzette and of course Keenan here that it is an opportunity to take a leadership position around that subject. And so
Can you hear me now?
Just the tail end there.
It looks like the connection's going out a bit, Charmaine. Sometimes what helps is turning your camera off, although we would love to see you. Sometimes that helps with the connection. I don't know if that'll work.
Okay, I'll turn my camera off. Okay. Hopefully it's better now. Can you hear me better now?
Yes,
okay.
Much better.
Yes, perfect.
Wonderful. So let's move on to our next question then. So our next question is, what advice would you give? So this is question 4. What advice would you give a BIPOC professional who may be experiencing discrimination or microaggressions microaggressions in the workplace. So who's interested? Would you like to take this one? Keenan?
Keenan.
Oh, was that for me, Charmaine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so again, this is a difficult situation, especially for young professionals, who you often doubt how you feel, and you say, is this a normal experience in the workplace? Should I be taking offense to it? Doubting yourself. And the thing I would say is that if you feel, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's usually a duck, right? If you feel weird about it, respect how you feel. And address it, and there are certain ways. Sometimes you can address it with a person directly, kind of tell them how what they did made you feel. Often in the workplace, that's not a really comfortable situation, again, especially for young and early stage professionals. And so part of what we do at the Onyx initiative is we surround our Onyx scholars with mentors outside of their workplace. And we find that that's important. So they have another resource and person to go to with experiences like potentially discrimination or microaggression in a very safe space, where they can, again, communicate what had happened and get very kind of direct pointed advice about how to handle that going forward, whether it's going to HR, whether it's maybe confronting a colleague and letting them just understand how you feel. But I think, again, if you're fortunate to be in a program like Onyx or have a designated mentor, leverage those people in these types of situations. And then, I think the other thing is just to go to someone you trust, who you believe might have some experience, and just be honest and open about how you feel. And don't be shy or question that. If you feel something, there's something there. So again, don't be shy about that.
Good. Thank you so much. So that piece about having a mentor to talk to is very important. It's a very valuable piece of information. Thank you. Tanya, do you have anything that you have any advice to give to BIPOC professionals who may be experiencing discrimination or microaggressions in the workplace?
Absolutely. So to expand on what Keenan had said, I absolutely agree with the HR aspect, having a mentor. For myself, I would expand on that a little bit in saying, know your audience. And in what I'm saying behind that is, if someone says something to you, recognize who they are and how they take things in. Are they going to be openly receptive to you talking directly to them? It's possible that they may not be someone who is receptive to having a conversation like that. So that's where knowing your audience would come from. So maybe then that might mean that you do speak to HR. Maybe you do have a mentor. Maybe there are employee resource groups and someone that you feel comfortable, but find someone that you feel comfortable talking to. It may even be that it's a conversation that is just being had between you and that other person, being the mentor or the HR person, and that you, after having that conversation, maybe you don't need to address it with the individual who initially brought up those feelings or those comments within you. Sometimes just talking things through, work it out. Sometimes it really is, if it's, and I have experienced that. I have spoke at different events and such and have had people reach out to me and talk to me about the color of my hair. I am a very tattooed individual, coming to me about assuming that I am uneducated. And wow, you spoke really well. When I first saw you, I didn't think that it would go that well. So in taking those appearances are not, we need to get those and put those aside. Same as I've had people come to me and say, wow, but you speak about Indigenous things, you're so white, you're just a white girl. So in having those things, some of those things really are, I walk away, I shake my head and go, wow, that's amazing. I wonder what you're like when you're not at work or talking in public, right? Whatever it is, when it's just a one-on-one. So really, part of it, I would say, to step back and take a moment from it when it happens. And again, I'm just going to reiterate the really knowing your audience.
Right. Thank you. Very invaluable. I think taking that step back is important, kind of calming yourself down before approaching. So, Jay, do you have anything to add to this? Have you had any experience or any advice that you can offer BIPOC professionals?
Yeah, for sure. And it's really building off of everything that the panels suggested already. It's really diving into that support network that you have and finding somebody that you trust to have that conversation with and talk it through. And then ideally that person would help you through that process, whether there's a structured process at the organization that you're sitting with. But you would know yourself and you would understand the situation but having somebody there to kind of help you through that process, most definitely for somebody who's new to their role or early talent, and going through that, it's very daunting. And yeah, sometimes you question yourself and think, did I take this the wrong way, or what was the situation that led up to this, and kind of backtracking, but you know yourself enough that if it's something that you want to go forward with, I say yes. And that's really the time that you dive into that support network and find the people that are there to help you through that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Imran, and what about yourself? Do you have any advice for our learners today?
Yeah, I definitely don't have the same corporate experience as the rest of the panel here of dealing with this in that setting. But for us as a startup, a lot of the decisions we make are merit based. And I think one thing that I'm taking away from Tanya's answer here is you might want to approach this with a bit of a different attack vector if you're talking to someone that might not be receptive to hearing this kind of feedback that you felt discriminated against or that you felt some of this microaggression directly. I would try and have a conversation around the shared goals you have. I think that if you're working together, there's an advantage, of course, to being able to get things done towards the same goals. And if you have that kind of a conversation, if you bring up, hey, I feel that something might be amiss here. How can I help with what you're doing? You may be able to skirt the direct confrontation, but still get them on your side. I think you might force them at that point to think about why they're making working with you more difficult than it has to be. Again, it might not work for every scenario, but at the end of the day, if you're part of the same workplace, you're most likely working towards the same goals. And I think you have to just pick which battle you want to fight at that point. Are you trying to add value to the role that you're in? And if that's the case, can you get them talking about the shared goals you're working towards and find a way to work together that might help them overcome some of these preconceived notions that they're holding against you? Or are you trying to directly address a situation of discrimination? And as Tanya said, you might have to think about how that person would best receive that kind of feedback. But I would try a bit of a different attack vector here and just consider what your goal is. Which battle are you trying to fight there?
Okay, so thank you. So some really great tips that we've got so far for you learners is that really you do want to know your audience, kind of have a feeling as to how you can approach that person, maybe take a step back before kind of responding to them, talk to your mentors, or if you have to speak to HR. And as Imran said, just focusing a lot on the goals that you have for that organization, and maybe that will be the commonality for you both. So thank you. On to our next question now. So our next question is, what is the most inclusive work environment that you have experienced, and how did yourself and your colleagues cultivate that type of workspace? So let's see. Tanya, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. So, the most inclusive work environment that I have experienced is the one that I'm currently in. I am having started the ERG has broadened my knowledge as well as my colleague base. So the people that I know we work together. So all of the ERG leads, we have um, our employee resource groups, we have resource groups, there's one vibe, which is valuing the inclusion of Black employees. We have AMP, which is for multicultural. We have Proud, so that is for our LGBTQ 2S plus. So in working with them, that we at Manulife are working very hard, and I think we're doing a really great job at cultivating that comfort and having that workplace of true diversity and inclusion. And all of us ERG leads are working very hard to putting on different events. I just work with our Proud ERG, and we put on an event with a Two-Spirit individual. He's an artist, Ojibwe, out of Toronto, Patrick Hunter. And we're doing other events together. So to bring that education and awareness, I think, and we're in a perfect environment for it, right? It's such a big conversation right now.
Right. Well, it's great to hear that you're happy in the workplace that you're at right now and that there's a lot of great things that they're doing. Thank you. Keenan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I alluded to earlier in the conversation, and the most inclusive environment I worked in was when I worked for Black Entertainment Television. And, simply it was inclusive. How do we foster that? It was inclusive because it was diverse, and representation matters. So
Right.
I think in terms, the best way for organizations to foster inclusivity is to increase representation. So, I mean, being proactive about that, it's fantastic to hear, from Tanya about the employee resource groups at Manulife or the, different communities. But, outwardly showing that your organization is inclusive and proactively recruiting diverse voices to your organization, in my opinion, is truly the best way to foster inclusivity.
Thank you so much. I agree with you. Jade, what about yourself? Did you have any, can you tell us about your most inclusive work environment?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been lucky enough to work for organizations that are very inclusive. So I don't know if I could say one is more than the other, but I'll maybe focus on the organization that I'm with right now, KPMG. Although I'm new, I'm still kind of learning and understanding everything, but I think it's really to create that inclusive environment. And what I've found, and most definitely at KPMG, is having those open discussions and being open to these types of conversations, and then offering tools to engage and understand and educate and aware and build that awareness piece. And then it's also about the opportunities to engage with one another and go through this and act as an ally, and what does that look like. And it's really also about understanding the intersectionality of everything, the intersectionality of our personalities, as myself, an Indigenous woman, so I'm falling under two categories, but everybody is kind of a little bit of everything, and then understanding the allyship and the supports that we need to give. Similar to Tanya, my organization has a number of people's networks, which are similar, I guess maybe different terms, but it's about all kind of working together and understanding what it means to participate in that group, but also to offer allyship and what that looks like. And that's really about bringing that inclusivity into the core of the organization and understanding that identity. And as was mentioned as well, it is also about representation, but outside of that, it's also about bringing that and ingraining it into the culture of an organization and really bringing that forward. So, but yes, I've been lucky to participate in some really great organizations where diversity and inclusion is at the core of everything. And then also because of my work, I guess I see it a little more prevalent, but.
Right. Okay, thank you so much. Imran, what about yourself?
For us, it's definitely Instage. For myself, it's definitely Instage, because I think the guiding light for us has always been our goals are very clear. When we started this company, we wanted to work with Manulife. We wanted to work with KPMG. We wanted to work with huge schools like Humber and Seneca. And the only way to do that was to make sure that whoever had the best idea was heard. We didn't have time to discriminate for reasons that weren't logic based, and so we've hired everyone under the sun. who can get the job done. So it's never mattered to us background, again, sexual orientation, degree, whoever has the best idea and can most quickly advance the goals of the company. We want those people on our team because, again, our goals are clear. The mission for us is clear, and that's, I think, what's fostered the work environment we have. We wanted to do big things quickly, and I think it's it's a shame to think that something like discrimination or microaggression can halt that. It's losing sight of the goal in my mind, and so I've been lucky to work with a team that understands that. No one takes offense. It doesn't matter if you are on the founding team and someone who's just joined the company comes up with a better idea than you. We're looking for whoever can make the best decision for the company, and that's what guides us. And I think that's what's made it such an inclusive environment, is that we all share that vision and that goal. And so that's been a big part of what's helped us grow as quickly as we have. And I'm super proud to be part of a team like that.
Wonderful. Wow, it sounds like you're having a great opportunity there. And what I'm getting from everybody on the panel really is some of the main things that make a workplace really inclusive is representation, is an organization being proactive and being able to have these conversations, and that all of those things working towards a common goal will make it probably a pretty great place to work. All right, so we're going to go on to our next question because we have just a few minutes before we get to the question and answer period. Our next question now, we're going to go to question 7 just to make sure that we have enough time for everything. So our next question is, based on your experience, what is the one must-know piece of advice that you would give to current and graduating students? And it may relate to the skills for the job market, the process of finding work, or even your personal insight. So who would like to start with this one? Maybe I'll throw it out to Tanya.
Absolutely. So based on my experience, what is the one must-know piece of advice? I'm going to reiterate what I had said earlier, in that being yourself and knowing yourself. Because being yourself and knowing yourself, you're going to be true to who you are, and you are going to bring that to the table when you are, whether you're looking for a job, whether you're just starting in a position, knowing yourself and truly being true to it and bringing yourself. Full stop.
Okay, sounds great. So don't hide yourself, be who exactly you are. I agree with that. So Jade, what about you? What's your one must-know piece of advice?
Yeah, for sure. And this is going to come from the perspective of somebody who's looking at resumes every day, and most definitely early talent resumes. So it's going to be a little bit, so I'll give my piece anyhow. So as somebody who's coming into the workforce and not necessarily having a ton of maybe internships or things like that on their resume, I always suggest for individuals to take every opportunity that they can, whether it's participating in an association, or if it's taking on a volunteer opportunity, or maybe it's raising your hand for a project. It's things like that that are really going to kind of set you apart as you're looking to graduate and as you're entering the workforce, because that's really not only going to show who you are and how passionate you are, but it's going to give me a little bit of an idea, or not me directly, but recruiters and individuals that would be looking at your resume, ideas about who and what's important to you, and obviously your skills, because these opportunities such as volunteering, they're going to build out those soft skills, perhaps even hard skills that organizations are looking for. And not everybody's going to come into the workforce having kind of corporate setting experiences, and that's not always what large organizations are looking for. Most definitely now, we're not looking for that cookie cutter, because we've done that over and over again. We're looking for different kinds of experiences, different backgrounds, and different kinds of people to come into organizations, shake things up and change things, and get to where we want to get to a lot quicker. So my suggestion as you enter the job market is really to take on opportunities, whether they seem something big or small, and include those and really build them out into something that kind of shows individuals who you are and what you're passionate about and where your skills and abilities lie. So that's my suggestion. Hopefully it was helpful.
Yes, it was for sure. Thank you so much. I saw Imran really nodding his head with that. So Imran, did you want to add a little something or give us your must-know piece of advice?
Yes, you're 100% right. I fully agree with that, and I kind of want to bridge Jade's answer to Tanya's answer. I really encourage the same thing, and don't wait till you feel absolutely ready to try those things. I think a big part of getting to know yourself and being comfortable with yourself, like Tanya said, which I again agree with, it takes you so far, and it takes you to a place you want to be because you're being honest with yourself. I think it comes from doing what Jade said. I think it comes from putting yourself out there. It's not necessarily relaxing, but you will grow so much by doing that, by trying things and figuring out what you like, what you don't like. And I think that experience is where you get the confidence to be comfortable being yourself and to tell people, who you are authentically, as Tanya mentioned. I don't think that it's easy to do that if you keep your experiences limited. You don't build the same sense of confidence or resilience unless you've put yourself out there a number of times. So yeah, I definitely think those are two really valuable pieces of advice.
Thank you so much. I agree 100% with everything you've just said. And Keenan, last but not least, give us your must-know piece of advice for students.
Yeah, for me, it would just be, I think something that they don't tell you when you're in school is that finding your first job is a full-time job, right? Like you, I don't know if that's Charmaine laughing, but it's like, you think you've done the right things, you graduate, you got the good grades, and you're going to throw your resume out there and people are going to be like piling over each other to sign you up. It doesn't necessarily work out like that, and that's okay, right? Like, you don't, what I want to say is just don't be discouraged that, the first through applications, like you don't get job offers, right? Like continue to stay with it, put effort and energy into every application and just understand that it takes, like I said, it's a full-time job, revising your cover letters and doing job searches and finding new roles. And ultimately it's all worth it. And I think it gets easier and easier once you get over that hurdle of that first job, you get more experience, you build your network, then opportunities start to find you. But that first one is tough, and just, like I said, be resilient, be persistent, and don't get discouraged.
Thank you so much. I agree with that as well. So this is all very valuable advice that we have for you as learners. One of the things I always say to the students is that, you may be in a work experience that you might not think is your greatest experience, but learn from that. Maybe you're learning what you don't want for the future, right? So every experience, as they've said, embrace it and be true to yourself, and you will eventually succeed in your careers. So thank you all very much, panelists.